The Indigo Disc DLC released a lot of legendary Pokemon into Generation 9, from new Pokemon like Terrapagos to returning Pokemon like Ho-Oh. The Uber's tier on Pokemon Showdown is a fan-made format where you 6v6 battle with these normally banned legendary Pokemon, and it gets more than 100,000 games per month. Let's take a look at the top 10 most used Pokemon in this format and what makes these legendaries so good. At number 10, we have Terrapagos, a normal type Pokemon. Terrapagos is the new legendary Pokemon introduced with the new DLC, and it can be a little complicated, so let me explain how it works first. Terrapagos starts off with the baby form, who is terrible, but whenever it enters the field, it activates its ability Terra Shell and transforms into Terrapagos' terrestrial form. This ability cannot be blocked in any way, and effectively, Terrapagos is always in its terrestrial form. Why does a baby form exist? Who knows, but it has literally zero practical implication. The terrestrial form is a respectable 600 base stat Pokemon who gains the ability Terra Shell, which cuts the damage in half of an attack towards it if Terrapagos is at 100% HP. It's a very good ability and is comparable to something like Dragonite's multi-scale ability. Terrapagos also gets a signature move, Terra Starstorm, a 120 base power normal type move. But the real kicker is that if Terrapagos terrestrializes, it turns into Terrapagos Stellar, a base 700 power monster. That is what makes it an Uber's caliber Pokemon. Also, Terra Starstorm turns into a Stellar type move too. The most common way to use Terrapagos is as a sweeping Pokemon with Calm Mind and either Rock Polish or Rapid Spin to boost speed. Then to attack, you would use Terra Sandstorm and a coverage move of your choice like Earth Power or Dazzling Gleam. You tank a hit with the Terra Shell ability, and then you terrestrialize and try and win the game. It's a devastating sweeper who can be tough to stop after a terrestrialization because nothing will resist a Stellar type attack. Other than that, you might have other ideas like a bulky variant with Rest, or other defensive moves like Stealth Rock or Toxic. But the truth about Terrapagos is that it's not actually that good. It might surprise you to hear when you hear that it's the number 10 Pokemon, but most of that usage is because people are excited to try new Pokemon, not necessarily because it is actually a top 10 Pokemon. The main reason it's not considered to be good is because number 1, it limits flexibility because you almost have to terrestrialize Terrapagos, and if you do that, you can't terrestrialize a different Pokemon. But to be honest, that would be worth it if the gain was a lot. But the most important thing is that even when you do terrestrialize, it's still only an average to above average Pokemon amongst other legendary Pokemon. The problem is that it takes way too long to develop. To try and sweep through a team, you need to use Calm Mind for power and then Rapid Spin for speed. But one Calm Mind isn't really good enough. You probably need 2 or 3 to get the power you need to one-hit KO different Pokemon. Then after that, you still need 1 more turn to use Rapid Spin to get your speed boost. Terrapagos takes too long to develop into a serious threat. A good opponent will not give you all those free turns to try and set up your win. Offensive teams will attack you too many times while you try to get going, and defensive teams will have moves like Roar or Haze. Unfortunately, the newest legendary is not an overall good Pokemon in an Uber's context, and it's made top 10 from what I call new toy syndrome, a phenomenon where new Pokemon get used more than they should. But at number 9, we have a Pokemon that deserves the hype, and that is Calyrex Ice, an Ice and Psychic type Pokemon. Calyrex Ice, a legendary from Generation 8, returns to make its mark as a powerful sweeper, but it often uses an unconventional moveset, which is Trick Room. A lot of legendaries tend to be fast, powerful dragon-type monsters, and Calyrex Ice turns the table on them. We'll talk about them later, but in particular, it's good versus Miraidon and Koraidon, the new legendary Pokemon of Generation 9. With Trick Room and Swords Dance, Calyrex Ice can break through these dragons with Glacial Lance, one of the strongest Ice-type moves in the game. The Ice typing is generally good in a legendary context because it happens that so many legendary Pokemon are Dragon types. Then, with high horsepower to hit Steel-type Pokemon and great natural defensive stats, Calyrex is strong and tough to take down too. Trick Room is a very nuanced idea, and it takes advantage of fast, high-flying offense. Trick Room is an inherently tricky strategy to use because 5 turns is not a lot of time, but Calyrex makes the most of it because it sets it up for itself, which means you don't have to waste 1 turn switching to a different Pokemon. Trick Room strategies are difficult to use because you need a good understanding of how to manage time, and it's placed itself as number 9 in usage as a great sweeping Pokemon who can be difficult to execute. At number 8, we have the lovable ogre, Kyogre, the water-type Pokemon. Kyogre is actually down from earlier in the generation. Kyogre was the top legendary, and it still is, but new legendaries have reduced its usage. Kyogre's game plan is relatively simple. It's going to destroy you with powerful water-type attacks and take advantage of its Drizzle ability, which automatically sets up rain. Broadly, there are 2 ways to use Kyogre. The most common way would be to use a Choice Scarf or Choice Specs attacker with Water Spout. A base 150 power water-type move in the rain is terrifying. Even if you're not at full HP, you can destroy with Origin Pulse, a respectably strong move too. The second way to use it is as a Calm Mind Pokemon. You drop Water Spout and use the boosting move Calm Mind instead. You break through an opponent with moves like Origin Pulse and Thunder, which cannot miss in the rain. You would typically also run a bulkier EV spread so you can take on more attacks from the opponent. Kyogre stays as solid as it's always been, being a staple of Uber's metagames for 20 years now ever since it was introduced. The minor drop in usage is only general fluctuation, and it's still a top Pokemon. At number 7, we have the return of Deoxys Attack, the Psychic-type Pokemon. Deoxys was absent from Generation 8, but it returns to be a top Pokemon like it was in the past. The reason is simple. Deoxys Attack is the ultimate high-risk, high-reward Pokemon. The ultimate glass cannon. Deoxys Attack will outspeed and it will one-hit KO you. It has every coverage move you can think of, and all these moves are strong too. With a Life Orb and a mixed attacking moveset, there is literally no Pokemon that can take on Deoxys. There's even other options too, like Focus Sash or new to Gen 9 Power Herb Meteor Beam to get a strong rock type move and a special attack boost. But of course, it has major problems with its defense. It's tough to get Deoxys safely into the game because Psychic is a pretty bad defensive typing too. Deoxys is also weak to all sorts of priority moves like Sucker Punch and Extreme Speed. Deoxys can use Terra Ghost and Shadow Ball for an immunity to Extreme Speed, and Sucker Punch happens to not be as common in Ubers right now, which is a big help too. Basically, if you back yourself to put yourself in attacking positions, Deoxys is your best friend. Number 7 reflects the high-risk, high-reward nature of Deoxys. It's statistically one of the toughest Pokemon to take on, but it's so tough to use too that it prevents more people from using it. At number 6, we have the return of Ho-Oh, the fire flying type Pokemon. Unlike Deoxys, Ho-Oh is good because it fits well on so many different teams and it does so many things well. With the Regenerator ability, Ho-Oh is actually a defensive stalwart capable of taking on a variety of different attacks and sending those attackers back and then healing off all the damage at no cost. Ho-Oh's sheer defenses are tough to break down, and Regenerator is a perfect complement. Sacred Fire is also one of the best moves in the game and makes Ho-Oh even more deadly. Ho-Oh's special defense is incredible, so if there's ever a way to target it, it would be on the relatively lower physical defense. But the threat of burn from Sacred Fire makes that incredibly tough. Ho-Oh is a type of Pokemon where you know exactly what it's going to do every game. It lost a lot of moves from before like Defog, Toxic, and Thunder Wave, so it's only going to use Sacred Fire, Brave Bird, Recover, and a filler move. But still, it's hard to break through. Meanwhile, it's still dealing respectable amounts of damage to you while you're struggling to break it down. As a defensive fire type, Ho-Oh also does well versus Zacian, another Pokemon that we'll talk about later. Ho-Oh also has nice defensive Terra options like Terra Fairy to take on Koraidon. Number 6 reflects Ho-Oh's position. It's consistently great and a fine piece on any team, but it's never the star Pokemon. It's never going to sweep an entire team, but it's always going to be good. At number 5, we have Arceus Normal, the god of Pokemon. The reason is E-Killer. With Swords Dance and Extreme Speed, Arceus creates a famous moveset called E-Killer that can one-hit KO most Pokemon before they can even move. That E-Killer idea becomes even more deadly in Generation 9 with Terrestrialization Normal. Very few Pokemon can handle that combination of sheer power and speed. Also, because Arceus derives its speed from the priority of Extreme Speed, it doesn't need to train in speed EVs, it can instead train in HP to make it even more tough to take down. Add in other moves like Shadow Claw to hit Ghost-type Pokemon, Taunt to stop moves like Roar, and even Recover to heal if you want, and E-Killer is rightfully a top threat in the Uber's tier. Arceus Normal also has plenty of versatility to fool people who commit too hard into E-Killer. There are other movesets too, like Dragon Dance or Iron Defense or Bulk Up, with all sorts of moves like Foul Play or even Flare Blitz. The God of Pokemon has one standout idea, and then other more niche ideas that flow off of it. The reason Arceus isn't higher is because of competition from other Arceus forms. Arceus stats are great, but you can only have one Arceus on your team, so it's often a tough decision to decide which one to pick. Generally speaking, most teams will have an Arceus form on their team, but Normal is the most common. At number 4, we have Zacian Crowned, and here we start entering the realm of Pokemon that are pretty ridiculous. Zacian Crowned has the elite Fairy Steel typing and is both fast and strong, gaining an attack boost the first time it comes in because of its ability. With Swords Dance and that speed, it can one-hit KO all your team members if you're not ready. It doesn't have the sheer explosiveness of Deoxys attack, but it's much more consistent overall. Zacian's typing lets it find a lot more opportunities to go for that Swords Dance to try and win. I'd go as far as saying that Zacian is the perfect offensive Pokemon. It has the best typing in the game, Swords Dance, speed, and power. Little more needs to be said, and it's clear why it's a top Pokemon. In fact, the only reason it's not higher because it was actually nerfed entering Generation 9. Its ability only activates once per game now, and its stats are lower compared to Generation 8 too. At number 3, we have Necrozma Duskmane, a Steel Psychic-type Pokemon that dominated Generation 8 and continues that dominance here. Necrozma DM can do it all. Its Prism Armor ability, good stats, and Steel typing mean that defensively it can take on literally any Pokemon, at least temporarily. But it did have a little bit of a shift in role since Generation 8. Entering Generation 9, it lost Toxic and Thunder Wave, which limits its defensive capabilities. If you want to use it defensively, you would go with Stealth Rock, Knock Off, Sunsteel Strike, and Morning Sun. But offensively, it became a devastating Dragon Dance Pokemon too. Prism Armor helps Necrozma go for Dragon Dance, and its attacking stat is so good that it can legitimately win a game off of that. But more importantly, Generation 9 lost Ferrothorn, Yveltal, and Zygarde. It is so much easier to go for a win with Dragon Dance without these 3 Pokemon to try and stop it. Even amongst Dragon Dance ideas, there's a lot of variety. You can go for an all-out attacking Dragon Dance with max attack and max speed, or you can go even bulkier with moves like Morning Sun and a lot of HP training. The bulky Dragon Dance is the most common moveset because it gives you the best of both worlds. You can defend against powerful attackers like Zacian, but you still have the flexibility to try and sweep your opponent. You could even go Trick Room plus Swords Dance and try and win like that, just like Calyrex Ice. Necrozma's high usage rate is because it's one of the best defensive Pokemon and one of the best offensive Pokemon all at the same time. It's a multi-dimensional threat that can do whatever it wants. It always finds a place on your team because it can do so many things well, and that's why it's number 3. Now we get to the real icons of Pokemon and the Pokemon that have defined power creep, at least for 2023 and 2024. At number 2, we have Miraidon, the electric dragon, who is utterly ridiculous. Miraidon has the same explosive power of Deoxys attack, but without the drawback of a terrible defense. It has a strong base 135 special attack and 135 speed, and its ability sets up electric terrain and powers up the user when in that electric terrain. That means Miraidon's electric type moves are unreal. You get boosted by stab, electric terrain, and the ability. That combination of electric and dragon devastates almost every single team. You can go for raw power with choice specs, or you can become even deadlier with moves like Calm Mind and Agility. Instead of locking into a move, you just boost past the entire team. When we talk about usage rates, typically the top Pokemon are not necessarily the strongest Pokemon. Often they're the Pokemon which maybe don't have the highest power output, but can do a lot of different things well. That's not the case here. Miraidon is number 3 through sheer power, and it's the strongest Pokemon in the format and doesn't have a notable drawback. At number 1, we finally have Koraidon, the fighting dragon type Pokemon. Koraidon works similarly to Miraidon, but it focuses on being wide instead of deep. Koraidon is a dragon fighting type Pokemon who sets up Sun and gets a power boost in that weather. While Miraidon has a supercharged electric type attack, Koraidon basically gets 3 attacking types: fighting, dragon, and fire. Add Swords Dance to that idea and you have a wide diversity of attack, and it makes Koraidon tough to switch into because Koraidon basically has every good attacking move for its type. Koraidon also has the added benefit of putting up Sun for powerful friends like Fluttermane too. Koraidon and Miraidon have both always been clear top Pokemon, better than all the others, and their usage rates would be comparable as number 1 and number 2 in any order. But the reason Koraidon took the lead as of late was because of the introduction of Scale Shot. Scale Shot loaded dice increased the viability of Swords Dance Koraidon. Koraidon could sweep you outright by getting a power boost with Swords Dance and then a speed boost with the powerful Scale Shot. It's a true number 1 Pokemon. You put it on your team and you're guaranteed to output large, almost unstoppable amounts of damage. And that is the top 10 Pokemon in 2024. Honorable mention goes to other strong Pokemon like Fluttermane at number 11, and a dishonorable mention to Dialga and Palkia, who are considered to be terrible Pokemon in an Uber's context. Did any of these Pokemon surprise you? Let me know in the comment section below.